Great. So I would like to thank Raphael for organizing and thank you everyone for coming. I'm very much looking forward to these 2 days. So my talk is called Ideal and Non-Ideal Social Ontology. And just to fix ideas a little bit, with Ideal Social Ontology, I'm referring to the works of Margaret Gilbert, John Searle, Raimo Tuomela, who started the more traditional field of social ontology. And with non-ideal social ontology, examples include Austa's work, Johan Brännmark's work, my own work, also Sally Haslanger, Catherine Jenkins, and so on. And the book that Raphael referred to, it just was published yesterday, actually. So it's called Non-Ideal Social Ontology, The Power View. And in this book, I make the central claim that the paradigm shift is underway from ideal to non-ideal social ontology, and that this shift should be fully followed through. So that means that I have one descriptive claim saying that this shift is already underway, and then I have the normative claim that it should also be fully followed through. And the picture here, it's actually a friend of mine who made the book cover, the picture for the book cover. And I asked her to draw the paradigm shift, and she came up with this idea. And I think, as we will see during the talk today, at the top of the picture, we have abstract individuals all looking the same, and it's kind of a peaceful context. They are all holding hands and they all look alike. At the bottom of the picture, we have different individuals and they are not holding hands any longer, and there is quite a lot of turmoil going on. So I'll talk about this shift today. Some other central ideas in the book is to make a distinction between ideal and non-ideal social ontology, and also explain why I think there should be a shift towards non-ideal social ontology. I also, in the book, replace the notion of collective intentionality that I think have played too large a role in social ontology with social power, which I think is the core notion. And I also offer a taxonomy of social facts in virtue of social power. So that's an alternative to, for instance, Muhammad Ali Khalid's taxonomy on different kinds of mind dependence. Okay. The purpose of the talk today is to introduce the so-called two worlds metaphor that characterizes the central dividing lines in contemporary social ontology. So I want basically to say that there are two different research frames or two different paradigms in social ontology today, and the two worlds metaphor is one way of capturing the central dividing lines. After that, I will move into characterizing ideal social ontology in more detail by presenting the so-called standard model of ideal social ontology. That is a model I have developed that is based on central features that Searle, Gilbert, and Tuomela's theories share, and that has shaped a lot of the subsequent discussion in the field. And then I will argue that the standard model of ideal social ontology has certain problematic implications, such as giving a too narrow picture of the social world. For instance, the first kind of social kind has been omitted from view. So the agenda today, I'll start with the two worlds of contemporary social ontology. I move into the implications of these different two worlds, or the different research paradigms. And basically, social ontology today is a highly fragmented field. It's growing rapidly, which is great, but it's also quite a lot of differences there. So I want to say that in the two worlds, we see that there are three central disagreements that need to be addressed. Then I will move on to the standard model of ideal social ontology and some of the implications of this standard model. So let's turn to the two worlds metaphor. Here we have a typical example of non-ideal social ontology. This is a quote from Austa's Categories We Live By. Consider this scenario. You work as a coder in San Francisco. You go into your office where you're one of the guys. After work, you tag along with some friends at work to a bar. It's a very heteronormative space, and you are neither a guy nor a gal. You are an other. You walk up to the street to another bar where you are butch and expected to buy drinks for the femme. And here we move into a typical example of ideal social ontology. This is from John Searle's 1995 construction of social reality. Consider a simple scene like the following. I go into a cafe in Paris and sit in a chair at a table. The waiter comes and I utter a fragment of a French sentence. The waiter brings the beer and I drink it. I leave some money on the table and leave. Social ontologists live in two different worlds. The first is a harmonious social order where small groups of people go for walks and have picnics together. It's an equal society organized around formal positions, being a professor or being a citizen, certain informal social positions, being a friend, and the transparent or discernible powers that come with these roles. In general, there is consensus around the formal roles, and conflict is neither frequent nor severe. The inhabitants of this social world are blind to gender and race in the sense that differences of gender, race, sexuality, and the like are not considered relevant. The philosophers of this world aim to uncover the fundamental principles of society and offer a general theory of social phenomena. Their method is to start from simple cases and abstract away from the messiness of everyday life, such as material circumstances and most differences between individuals. Let us call this first world ideal social ontology. The second world is characterized by inequality and overt and covert conflicts that play out in everyday interactions between people, such as someone who insists on deciding their own gender pronoun or someone who decides who counts as a woman at a feminist activist meeting. It also plays out among large and hierarchical groups where some groups oppress or dominate other groups, sometimes without the awareness of the people involved. This society is not organized around only contested formal roles. In addition, a person's various and intersecting informal social roles, gender, race, sexuality, level of functioning, and so on, are of utmost importance for the organization of society and a person's life chances. A few philosophers of this world aim to offer a general theory of social phenomena, but most aim to offer theories of specific social phenomena like gender and race. Their theories should not only describe these phenomena correctly, but also provide useful tools for social change. Their method is to start from the messy and material circumstances of everyday life by using difficult and complex cases, refusing to abstract away from this messiness by using simplistic examples. Let us call this second world non-ideal social ontology. So, do we live in a world where a bunch of people are having a picnic together, or a world of constant conflict in need of a revolution? This question is, of course, exaggerated for effect, but the contrast between ideal and non-ideal social ontology is certainly very pronounced, and it can be seen both in the research questions posed and in what are taken to be the paradigmatic social phenomena. And if we examine both, it becomes clear that they either assume a consensus-oriented view of social phenomena or a view of conflict and contestation. So let's sum up a little bit here, the key ideas. So ideal social ontology, it's a world of a harmonious social order characterized by consensus. It's an equal society organized around formal positions, and one focuses on the transparent or the discernible powers of individuals, powers that people of the society in question know exist. Non-ideal social ontology, it's an unequal society characterized by overt and covert conflicts. It's organized around contested formal roles and also informal positions. And it focuses also on opaque and unjustified power relations. So taking some things and not others to be examples of paradigmatic social phenomena is a central theoretical choice that highlights some aspects of social reality while hiding others. The problem is that both worlds offer only a partial view of our social world while presenting that view as comprehensive. We actually live in both worlds. We actually do live in both worlds, and our theories of the social world thus need to capture all aspects of social reality. And the challenge in contemporary social ontology is the great divide between the two worlds and the few narrow bridges that span them. And the philosophers of these two worlds move only in one direction and not the other. Some non-ideal social ontologists have engaged with the main works in ideal social ontology, but the converse is not true. And I think something that is interesting to note here a little bit as well is that if we look at the front covers of these works that sort of shape traditional social ontology, we see this consensus oriented view. So we have Searle's construction of social reality, people are dancing and literally holding hands. We have Margaret Gilbert's rights and demands, where people are walking over a courtyard peacefully. But given the topic rights and demands, one might also have expected sort of suffragettes or the civil rights movement here on the book cover. And then we have Raimo Tuomela, the philosophy of sociality, where we have people eating peacefully together. So let's look at a little bit the implications now of the two worlds of this great divide in social ontology. And I think there are at least three central disagreements that needs to be addressed before we can move on to what Thomas Kuhn referred to as a state of normal science. The first disagreement is regarding the question, which are the social phenomena? And here we can see that people in the two worlds really choose different examples as examples of the paradigmatic social phenomena. So there is disagreement around what phenomena we should be analyzing. There is also disagreement about what counts as social in the first place. And that is, of course, partly dependent on theory, but that's also another disagreement, what counts as social. And then we have a disagreement around sort of the building blocks of the theories. Should we speak about social facts, for instance? Should we speak about social objects? Should we speak about social kinds? Or should we speak about properties of individuals? So we have quite a lot of disagreement regarding the social phenomena. And one more interesting thing to note is that there is not only disagreement about the content, so to speak. So in one world, we have money and private property as prime examples. In another world, we have race and gender. But I think there is also disagreement in terms of the form of the paradigmatic examples. So in ideal social ontology, it's most often the case that the participants in society know about the social phenomena in question, while in non-ideal social ontology, we also look at opaque kinds of social phenomena. So I would say that in general, in ideal social ontology, one has looked at the second and third kind of social kind in Khalid's classification, while in non-ideal social ontology, one has also paid more attention to the first kind of social kind. The second central disagreement in the field is what conditions of adequacy should a theory of the social world fulfill? And here I think there are many different views, and that of course means that sometimes we have disagreements that we think are genuine, but they might be apparent, at least on the theoretical level, because we have very different conditions of adequacy in mind. And then I also think that we should perhaps put even more emphasis on the question of what conditions of adequacy are good conditions. And here I think especially this plays out in the view, what is the role of the theorist? What is the role of the social ontologist? And usually in ideal social ontology, it is to describe the fundamental nature and structure of the social world, while in non-ideal social ontology, and especially in critical social ontology, the primary role is also to change the social world. And when it comes to the third central disagreement, there is also disagreement around the philosophical method, and especially what method should be used in answering these research questions. Should we use or not use empirical test cases to try our theories against? And I think this is sort of an implication of the great divide in social ontology, that there is disagreement around these very central questions. And the fragmentation of the fields shows up here as well. Okay, so the book is called Non-Ideal Social Ontologies. I want to say something about the distinction now between ideal and non-ideal social ontology. And in philosophy, there are multiple senses of ideal and non-ideal theory. One standard sense is to think about it in terms of ideal theory involving normative questions like political philosophy, moral philosophy, while non-ideal theory concerns more descriptive questions. This is not how I use it. Rather, I rely on Charles Mills's work on ideal theory as idealized theory. So let's just look at Mills first before we turn to the standard model. So as a reminder, Mills is criticizing ideal theory, and he says that ideal theory are theories that are characterized by these 6 features. I have one more slide. So we have 6 features. So ideal theories, they display most or all of these features. And one feature is an idealized social ontology that will typically assume the abstract and undifferentiated equal atomic individuals of classical liberalism. Thus, it will abstract away from relations of structural domination, exploitation, coercion, and oppression. Ideal theory also assume idealized capacities, so individuals having completely unrealistic capacities attributed to them. And then I think here I've quoted a longer thing because I think this is the key dividing point also in social ontology, the silence on oppression or whether one is vocal about oppression. So Mill says, little or nothing will be said on actual historic oppression and its legacy in the present, current, ongoing oppression. This silence applies to how systemic oppression both influences individuals and our basic social institutions. Consequently, according to Mills, ideal theory cannot provide the conceptual resources to understand oppression. And for the last 3 criteria in Mills' characterization, ideal social institutions, ideal theory fails to understand these institutions' actual workings, how the actual workings may systematically disadvantage women, the poor, and racial minorities. An idealized cognitive sphere, the failure of ideal theory to theorize or acknowledge the consequences of oppression on our thinking, and then strict compliance theory, where the first idea is to investigate the principles of justice that regulates a well-ordered society, and the second idea is that one needs to start with ideal theory before one can address the non-ideal problems or problems of partial compliance. And here I basically use non-ideal social ontology and ideal social ontology as saying that ideal social ontology is any theory that shares the idealized social ontology, silence on oppression, ideal social institutions, and an idealized cognitive sphere. And the key difference between the 2 worlds and the key difference between ideal and non-ideal social ontology is being silent on or vocal about unjustified power relations. Okay, now I would like to introduce the standard model of social ontology, and I take a little bit of a break because I have put a handout in the chat for you all to have accessible when I present the standard model. So let's just see that you all find it. Brian, can you make a mark to me if you find it, wave or something? Okay, let's see, Rafael, can you help me to share it again? I have shared it.
Yeah, just try again, because as you shared it before people were there, maybe it was just sent to me.
Okay, I see, yeah. I'll share it again. There we go. Yeah, now we have it. Daniel, thank you.
Okay, it seems that it works.
Yeah, great, thank you. Okay, so here we have the standard model of ideal social ontology, and it has 5 different categories. The main aims of the standard model, the basic building blocks, the method, objects of analysis, and features of the paradigmatic social phenomena. And basically what I've done is that I've carefully studied the works of Gilbert, Tumela, and Searle to see what kind of elements or what kind of features do they have in common that are important for how the field was shaped. So when it comes to the, and also I think there is a relationship between the standard model and Mill's distinction between ideal and non-ideal social ontology, in the sense that the standard model is more fundamental. So many of the features of Mill's distinction actually follow from the standard model, and some features are the same. So let's start with what is the main aims of ideal social ontology. And here I want to sort of recall the 2 worlds metaphor, where we said it was about providing a general theory of the social world. So the scope claim amounts to the idea that we want to offer general theories of the ontology of social and institutional reality. And the foundation claim is that theories in social ontology are the foundation of the social sciences, either by providing and clarifying fundamental concepts or by giving an account of the nature and existence of social phenomena. When it comes to the basic building blocks, the collective intentionality claim amounts to that collective intentionality is the basic building block of social reality and a necessary condition for the existence of either all or standard institutions. The deonticity claim means that deontic notions such as commitment, right, and obligation are key notions and indeed the very glue of society. The power claim amounts to the idea that the enabling and restricting aspects of social and institutional power, such as rights and obligations, are emphasized as key phenomena. The reflexivity claim amounts to that primary social phenomena are constituted by self-fulfilling prophecies or beliefs about beliefs. And the performativity claim is that social phenomena are created and maintained by individuals who belong to a given social group, either through explicit performatives or acts that have the same logical structure as performative. When it comes to the philosophical method use, we have 2 elements. We have generic stylized facts. This is a term I borrow from Francesco Guala. So generic stylized facts is the idea that what is used is abstract examples void of much empirical detail. They are often used as the paradigmatic examples in conducting conceptual analysis. And the first person point of view amounts to the idea that the social world is to be explained through the first person intentionalist perspective. When it comes to the question, what are the social phenomena we should be explaining, the objects of analysis are collective intentionality, such as walking together, institutions such as money and private property, and social and institutional facts, such as the fact that Tom is a US citizen. And then I think, interestingly, if we look at the features of the paradigmatic social phenomena, we can see that they share certain things. And one is the so-called string quartet paradigm of social group, a term from Christopher Kutz. And this is the idea that small and egalitarian groups are used as the paradigmatic example of collective intentionality. And when it comes to institutions and the paradigmatic examples, we see the bright side of institutions, emphasis on the benefits of institutions, such as solving collective action dilemmas and enabling action. The direct social phenomena means that there is nearly exclusive emphasis on phenomena that are directly dependent on collective intentionality. And the visible aspects of social reality means that there is nearly exclusive emphasis on transparent social phenomena, such as being a professor. So let's now turn to what are the implications of this standard model, because I think these elements have really shaped certain parts of the field in a significant respect. So it's important also to look at the consequences of this. So implications of the standard model of ideal social ontology. So I start now with the second category, which is the basic building blocks and the features of social phenomena. And recall the collective intentionality claim that collective intentionality is a necessary condition for the existence of either all or the standard institutions. This means that a lot of social reality goes on in the heads of individuals, and this means that it also, the implication is that it lessens the importance of material circumstances in our analysis of social reality. The deonticity claim, that's the idea that deontic notions like obligation, right, and commitment is really the glue of society, and especially there is a lot of focus on deontic power. But that has as a consequence that one is silent on or does not acknowledge the other forms of social power than the deontic. I have argued that there is another form of power that is called telic power, for instance, and I also think that there are effects of deontic power, the distribution of deontic power, that we could call structural power. So here the point is that we see one form of power that we might miss out, or other forms of social power that also provide agents with reasons for actions, and reasons for actions that could conflict with deontic power, they drop out of sight. The power claim, that means that one is looking at the enabling and restricting aspects of power. And here the implication is that one is silent on or does not acknowledge the productive aspects of power. And what I mean by that is that if we look at ideal social ontology first, we have a case where people have the preferences they have, and then we sort of set up an institution, and that institution will affect their preferences in a weak sense. So when we have an obligation to pay taxes, you get some independent reasons to action to pay the taxes. But this form of power does not really enter the individuals in a deep sense. It does not affect their identity in a very deep sense. If we turn to other social theorists like Michel Foucault or Mary Wollstonecraft, they were interested in how our social reality shape individuals in a much stronger sense. So not taking the preferences in a weak sense, but how institutions actually affect the very nature of the preferences. So Wollstonecraft, for instance, looks at how the education of women and how the norms that governed how a woman should behave was in contradiction to the true virtues of reason. So I think here an important part is that we lose out on the productive aspects of power. When it comes to the reflexivity claim, that means that either one is silent on or that one cannot account for the first kind of social kind. So I think here there is an interesting relationship between the paradigmatic examples and the reflexivity claim. So once one chooses examples that the participants have beliefs about in a very direct sense, the reflexivity claim also seems more plausible than it actually is. But if we look at social kinds that individuals don't know exist in their society, let's say a class system or a recession or inflation being in place, reflexivity does not hold for these kinds of social phenomena. And when it comes to the performativity claim, that means that social institutions are created and maintained by a given social group. Here, the implication is that one is silent on controversial issues around group membership. So who belongs to the group in the first place is often not raised as a concern. Okay, we also had other categories in the standard model. We had the philosophical method, and we also had objects of analysis. So let's look at the first person point of view. What kind of implications does assuming the first person intentionalist perspective have? And the idea here is that social reality should be explained through the first person intentionalist perspective. But what it means is that it hides systemic features and groups that are not united by collective intentionality. Here I'm thinking especially about economic classes before consciousness raising. They will not be united by collective intentionality, but rather their place in the capitalist system. So once you assume the first person intentionalist perspective, you risk sort of have other kinds of important social phenomena that also affects individuals' life chances in a very significant way, they will drop out of the picture. When it comes to the generic stylized facts, that means that the differences of major concern for non-ideal social ontologists are often hidden from view. So let's take the traditional examples of being a professor, a president, or a public intellectual. If you are to understand the nature and existence of these phenomena, it's of course very wise to start with sort of highly abstract stylized examples, because it's difficult to get at an analysis of these things. But once you abstract away from all differences of individuals, the fact, for instance, that a woman has never been the US president drop out of sight, or facts about that it's easier for some people to become recognized as public intellectuals and not others, that also drop out of sight. So I think this abstracting away from a lot of the differences between individuals means also that major differences of major concern for the non-ideal social ontologists and social scientists are also hidden from view. And when it comes to the analysis of the social phenomena, which are the social phenomena we should explain, the common feature here is that less formal institutions and less formal roles are hidden from view by always sort of choosing, or most of the time choosing, examples like presidents and professors and money and so on. And the last category in the standard model, it's the features of the paradigmatic social phenomena. And here we have the string quartet paradigm of social group. We have small and egalitarian group that are used in the analysis of collective intentionality and in analyzing a social group. But that means that questions about sort of hierarchies or inequalities within the groups are not raised very much, and questions about domination between different kinds of large groups and groups that might not even know about themselves as groups are also hidden from view. When it comes to the bright side of institutions, that's the idea that we focus on how institutions also can enable actions and help us solve a lot of important collective action dilemmas. But the dark side of institutions is not paid much attention. And with that, I mean that also institutions enable some groups to dominate other groups, for instance, and there are also large differences in how the benefits of institutions are distributed to the participants in the institutions. When it comes to the direct social phenomena, and here I have really drawn a lot of the work of Mohammed Ali Khalidi, I think there is a general point here that the first kind of social kind does not receive much attention. And I think it basically comes down to two features. One is that the paradigmatic examples often are about direct social phenomena in the sense that the participants in the society have beliefs about those very phenomena. And it's also often has to do with the visible aspects of social reality, but we focus on examples that people know about, such as someone being a professor. But that means that opaque kinds of social facts that belong to the first kind of social kind, they are often hidden from view in this picture. So to sum up, I think that the standard model of ideal social ontology makes the social world unduly narrow. So this standard model has a crucial implication. It has shaped what social ontologies take the social phenomena to be analyzed to be: direct, transparent, and deontic phenomena built on consensus. Consequently, this model offers only a partial view of the social world while claiming it is general, and it's too limited to serve as the foundation of the social sciences. So here we come back to the first category in the standard model. This is an internal critique in the sense that in order to fulfill one's own aims of providing a general theory and to be the foundation of the social sciences, the standard model has made the social world too narrow. So we have, for instance, excluded economic classes that are not aware of themselves as a group. We have excluded the first kind of social kind, for instance. And I also think that there is too much emphasis on collective intentionality. I don't think it is a necessary condition for either institutions or the standard institutions. That's a claim I argue for further in the book. So thank you so much, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much for your talk and to reactions. Yeah. So thank you very much, Asa, for your very, very interesting talk. And I'm very glad that you started the conference, because you really raised an important problem. And I think that each one of us had to reflect about oneself to decide where he or she is in the classification. So if you have questions, maybe you could write it in the chat, or you could just write that you have a question in the chat, and yeah. So if okay, Asia. Wait, need to. I don't know if you can start your sound by yourself.
I think Matti and Asia. Yeah. You see everyone, right? Yeah.
Yeah, Asia, you can ask your question.
Thank you. Yeah, Elsa, I really enjoyed the talk, and I can't wait to read your book. Congratulations on it being out.
Thank you.
So I want to ask a question about whether kind of non-ideal theorists, at least some of the ones that you mentioned, whether their project really is in competition with the project of the ideal theorists that you mentioned. So it seems to me that the ideal theorists, I think, as you acknowledged, start with examples that are uncontroversially social, right? So their aim is to kind of give a general theory of examples that are uncontroversially social. But at least some of the non-ideal theorists, so I think Hasslinger is a great example, are engaged in a somewhat different project, it seems to me. So what Hasslinger herself has called the debunking project, where the aim is to actually start with something that, you know, ordinarily, or at least many people think is a natural kind or phenomenon, and then actually to debunk that ordinary conception and go on to argue that it's social. So that seems to be kind of a somewhat different project, and one that could, you know, at least in principle, kind of be carried along in tandem with the ideal one and isn't necessarily in competition with it. Now, I could see how maybe then at a like later stage of inquiry, we might say, oh, well, if now we've all been convinced by the debunker that, say, gender is social, now that should be kind of added to the list of uncontroversially social examples. And then at the like next stage of social ontological inquiry, maybe we need a new theory that can also account for that as a paradigm example. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that. Thanks.
Yes, thank you so much, Asia. And I think this is a very good point. And in the book, I write more about this point. So basically, with the standard model, I want to say it's a continuum in a sense. So you would place theories along a continuum. So with the ideal social ontologies, they fall on one end of the spectrum, and then we have a continuum. And I think in the middle of the spectrum, we have what I call non-ideal theories. And here I would say like Austa is a good example. Johan Brännmark is here as well. And I think they share the same aims to offer a general theory of the social world, but the difference is a little bit how the normative comes in. That Austa, for instance, also let certain normative commitments come into her theorizing. And then I think what you mentioned, exactly like Sally Haslinger's work, Catherine Jenkins' work, they are a special subcategory of non-ideal theory that I call critical social ontology. And there you are exactly right, the normative plays quite a different role. And I would say that they are not in competition because the project is so different. So there it's what is the best concept to come up with for social change, basically. And here I think there is a much stronger stipulative element. So I would say that the non-ideal social ontologists in the middle are in competition with the ideal social ontologists, and sometimes the critical social ontologists are engaged in a different project. Yes, thank you.
Great, thanks.
Matti had a question. Matti Sarkat had a question. I didn't see it at first.
Yeah. Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. So hi, Matti Sarkat from Helsinki. With respect to the distinction between ideal and non-ideal social ontology, I found it interesting that you referred to the work of Charles Mills, who seemed to associate ideal social theory with certain assumptions of the type of atomistic individualism that he associated with classical liberalism. Now, many authors in the tradition of analytical social ontology have also been prominent critics of individualism, and I agree with you that this has led them to overemphasize the internal coherence and stability of social groups. My question is whether the cure for this overemphasis on collective intentionality would not be to employ precisely the types of tools that Charles Mills seemed to have as the target of his criticism, that is, the tools of decision theory, game theory, and so forth, that look at the strategic resources that individuals bring to social interaction. And my question is whether you would think that this cure would be worse than the disease, or whether you would regard it as legitimate.
Thank you. Very nice. One point I would like to mention just at the outset is that I think if we want to provide a general theory of the social world, I think the conceptual resources of ideal theory are sometimes too limited. But for specific domains, for analyzing collective intentionality, collective responsibilities, these tools and theories are very good, just to say that at the outset. And then the way I read Mills, the most important criteria for me that really sort of is the central dividing point as I see it in our field today is the silence on oppression, whether or not one is silent or vocal about oppression. So that's the third criteria. And when it comes to his critique of classical liberalism, I think there is definitely this tendency that a lot of work in traditional social ontology take the stance of classical liberalism. It's a bunch of individuals forming a social context, and there you have an institutions, and we abstract away from any prior differences and inequalities between these people and why they would form an institution. So I think when it comes to the individualism in Mills and in social ontology, to look a little bit more maybe at the full picture and let's see, Matti, I think I lost a little bit at the end of your question there.
Yeah, so my question was to the extent that the authors in the collective intentionality tradition have been critics of individualism, whether it would not be a legitimate strategy to correct for this overemphasis that they've exhibited for the internal coherence of social group by returning back to perhaps a more sort of individualist strategic perspective that is sort of consistent with game theory, decision theory, and these types of resources.
Good. I need to think about this some more. The feature that I bring up here with Mills is the sort of abstracting away from the differences between individuals and what kind of role that plays in the theories. And I think that's still part of ideal social ontology. But I want to think a little bit more about your point. Thank you.
Muhammad Ali had a question.
Yeah, thanks. This was fascinating, Elsa, and I'm looking forward to reading the book. It also preempts many of the points that I was going to try and make tomorrow, but I think you did a much better job. So we'll see if I have anything left to say. One question I had, at the beginning, you said you were going to propose a taxonomy of social kinds that incorporates the notion of power and power relations. And I wasn't clear on what that was and whether you actually put a taxonomy forward.
Yes, I should have been more clear. So in the book, I provide a taxonomy of social facts in virtue of social power. But in today's talk, I basically presented the standard model and the introduction, but I would be happy because I've read many of your things, and in the book I draw quite a lot of your distinction and your taxonomy between the 3 kinds of social kinds. So if it's okay, I'm happy to say a little bit about the taxonomy as well. And I think basically there are 2 taxonomies on offer in the field today, yours and then Searle's in terms of functions. And then I was thinking about what is really the common trait, because I'm really fond of the first kind of social kind and Thomason's work on opaque kinds of social facts. But I was thinking that category is broad compared to the other 2, like the second and third are a bit more fixed. So then I was thinking, is it possible to make more distinctions within the first kind of social kind? And then I was thinking that nearly all the social phenomena that we are interested in and also social scientists are interested in and that affects the life chances of individuals are about different kinds of power. So in the taxonomy, I say that there are 4 different kinds of power: deontic and telic, and then we have structural power and spillover power. So basically spillover power is certain benefits and advantages you get from having deontic power, and structural power is basically the fallout of deontic power. So then I say that that any kind of social fact, you can place them into one of these 4 categories of power, or 1/5 category, which is social facts not about social power. So basically what I want to propose is that social power is the key social notion, but it has remained a bit underdeveloped in both of the worlds. But I still think that both non-ideal and ideal social ontology recognizes the importance of social power. So I also want to build a little bit of a bridge between the 2 worlds by emphasizing social power. So in the last chapter, I define these 4 types of social power and say how they can be a basis for a taxonomy. So I guess it would be a competing proposal to yours, but it also very much starts from yours, I would say.
Thanks. Just one clarification. These are distinctions within the opaque or the concept independent?
No, all actually. So I want to provide a general taxonomy.
Brian, you had a question?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry, I'm having some computer problems, so I'm going to keep switching between my Zoom venues. But this was really very interesting, and I'm really looking forward to reading your book. So I wanted to kind of distinguish what I saw as kind of 2 different claims that you were making. One of them was kind of about a methodology of non-ideal theory, where you're kind of arguing against the standard model. And I'm extremely sympathetic to that. And then there's another claim that you made about kind of the choice of paradigmatic social cases, where you said, made this contrast between like money and professors and collective intentionality versus race and gender. And that I was wondering about, because I'd be more inclined to challenge the standard analyses of the former cases, even of collective intentionality. So I actually don't have a problem at all regarding those as paradigmatic cases. I just think the analyses are wrong. So what do you think about that?
Yes, good. So I think there are many issues when it comes to the paradigmatic examples. And my first claim is descriptive in a sense. If we are to characterize the 2 worlds, what kind of examples have been chosen? And then I gave a lot of examples from critical social ontology as well. And then I think, just like you said, then we also give different analysis of them. That's one thing. And then a third point is that we also use the examples in very different ways. So in non-ideal social ontology, it's provided much more details, like in your work with the examples and so on. And I listened to Asia's talk about, is Bitcoin money? And I would say that's a typical question from non-ideal social ontology. You take a messy case, right? That is difficult, and you start from that instead of the highly stylized facts. So I would say it's a difference in the content, it's a difference in the analysis of them, and it's also a difference in the abstraction level. How much detail do you give to the cases? And sometimes it's very important to give the details in order to get at the correct analysis.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if I can just add, I mean, I think I think there's rhetorical value in both directions, but I do wonder if there could be more attention paid to kind of challenging the standard analyses. I'm a little concerned about making too many concessions to the standard analyses of phenomena like money and collective intentionality. I mean, it seems like there's a little bit of work. There's some representation, like in the conferences annually, about people who want to analyze collective intentionality as a phenomenon that arises much more from the kinds of complicated, groups at odds, or collections of people at odds with one another, than the kind of paradigmatic, modest sociality cases that people like Gilbert and Bratman work with. I think that that if that can be effective, if we can come up with cohesive alternative analyses, that's in some ways a really good way to undercut what you're working against, and kind of the kind of unrealistic idealized treatment of these things.
Yes, and I think it's also highly important to work on all these projects in parallel, because I think there has been also this risk of saying that we will deal with the non-ideal cases or the actual cases later, but we risk not getting to that point because it's so difficult to get even the first cases right. So yeah. Thank you, Brian.
So thank you very much for this very interesting session, and we take 5-minute breaks. We can meet in 5 minutes.
Yeah. Thank you all. Thank you.
And a round of applause, of course, for you, because it's really great. And
thank you.
Thank you all for being here